So, um, to be honest, unless you guys ask me something specific, I'm probably just gonna do stuff when I have something to talk about or say or whatever. You know, I don't know if I got a topic I want to tackle or what have you. All right, and that is the case today. I got a couple things. I'm probably gonna do it in two videos, but because I want to keep the topics kind of separate from one another. And one is of more interest to people in general versus the other one is going to be more geared towards a certain type of person, I guess. Not to be ambiguous, the one is more religious content, and this one here kind of ties in with it, but it has more to do with magic. And that's something that interests people a lot. So I figure we should maybe go over some of that stuff. Because this is going to be a channel that covers some of that stuff. Now, by no means do I pretend to be an expert in anything. All right, I'm just sharing my thoughts on stuff. People get real upset and butthurt when someone has like an opinion or a thought, a take on something, sometimes, especially when they themselves consider themselves to be an expert. Though you can have a lot of knowledge, sometimes it doesn't necessarily equate to wisdom. I should probably get my notes, huh? For this little thing. Yeah. Because I did write some stuff down. Actually, about that topic. About knowledge and understanding and wisdom. But I suppose that's the next episode stuff. So it's still good I grabbed my notes, but this is, I suppose, more falls in the religious stuff. It's still something can be gleaned in general, and if you're smart and wise, one of those that likes to learn stuff, uh, or maybe you're into the occult and you consider yourself like an intellectual or what have you, you would realize that there is wisdom and it's important, and probably watch all the episodes, the other stuff too. All right. So what's the point I'm trying to make? What are we going to be talking about today when it comes to magic? All right. Well, I haven't really talked much about it on the channel, so you might wonder what my beliefs are with regard to magic. Am I one of those like weirdo new age folks and stuff that believes in weird stuff? I suppose that's a term that weird could mean so many things to so many different people, I suppose, right? But there is a general consensus of what weird is. But I suppose for our purposes, we'll say something that just doesn't make sense. There are some weird things out there. People believe in some stuff that just doesn't make sense. Now, there's a difference between things that don't make sense because we don't really understand them yet, and things that don't make sense because they lack any logical frame whatsoever. And that's the problem, is when people fall into that camp where their stuff doesn't fit a logical frame. And I always try to think in a logical sense. So when it comes to Magick specifically, my approach on it has always been one of understanding, where I don't want to just learn star positions, categories of crystals, categories of like different types and branches of magic and things like that, and memorize stuff or light candles and pray about stuff I want. you know, I I want to understand how it works, why people get the results they get when they do magic. Because clearly there's something behind it. There's centuries worth, years worth. People have dedicated all of their time and energy, books. They've gotten together as groups to practice this sort of stuff and have sought after it and protected it and spent a lot of time learning as much as they can about it. Intellectual people, really super smart people going super far back. It's an ancient tradition. So there's something to it and not something that like is a waste of time. But a lot of smart people see that sometimes as exactly that. Like it's some big waste of time to get into all the hocus pocus stuff and to not be curious about it at least. But there are some intellectuals who occasionally will break that mold and get curious about it. One that springs to mind for most people is Carl Jung, because he was really into alchemy and stuff like that. But there certainly were others. They all, in some regard, have dabbled, depending on how far you go back, in some of that stuff. A lot of the intellectual works were intertwined with some of that stuff. So I don't know if that does or not give a good impression, or not impression, but a good helps you understand a little bit better about me and what I think about magic. You know, my thoughts on if it's real. It's certainly a thing that's misunderstood. If people want to know a bit more about the reality of magic and how it works, I suggest you do some research. A really good person to turn to with that is Alan Moore. He talks a lot about it and is a good source for trying to understand. Um, but it's a subtle thing. It's a thing that works in the background of the world. And so, what I'm going to try to do here on my channel is try to explain certain concepts within magic, within just anything that I learn, things that I think will help people, I guess. And, if you're into magic, this might help you. Why do I keep looking over here? It's because I got something I got to read out of that has to do with what I'm talking about when it comes to magic. You can learn about this stuff and all sorts of different things. That's why it's really important that you read a lot of different stuff. And so one of the things that we are going to learn about today is directions. we're gonna actually, I guess, discuss it, I suppose, more, because there may be people that disagree with me, and also there might be a couple different ways to look at it. You know, this might not be the only truth, as they say sometimes. Well, not sometimes. It's quite the saying that's tossed around, but half truths we talk about in mysticism. All truths are but half truths. Meaning that, you know, there's a bit of truth to everything. It depends on the perspective. Anyways, one of the books that I have here is Dante's Inferno, or Dante's Divine Comedy. Rather, this is the whole complete thing. But the reason I have this brought up is because there's a passage in here that I'm going to read to you that talks about today's topic when it comes to magic. Directions. Okay? Spatial directions. When we think about the world that we live in, it's three-dimensional. We have an up, we have a down, and then we have our, I don't know if this is, but our one way and the other way, we'll say. Because I don't know how that's going to turn out, left or right, with the flipping. And I'm not going to do the math in my head right now. A little baked at the moment. I don't want to think too hard. But anyways, then you got towards and away. This would be my towards and away towards you, but you know, I'm flipping it for you. Anyways, there's additional directions when it comes to magic and when it comes to certain religious contexts, like in Judaism, there is an in and an out direction. I'm pretty sure that's it might be referred to as something else, but that's essentially what it's supposed to be. Is it's supposed to be a sixth or a fourth direction. I don't know. It's an additional axis. And then that's also reflected in, I'm pretty sure, like the Indian religions or something like that. Maybe Hinduism. I forget, but it was a term that was popularized by this guy. I forget his name, but he popularized it through referring to it as the Greek versions of those names, which is Ana and Kata. My dog's getting up, and it's going to sound like he's tap dancing behind us here. Hopefully he doesn't make too much noise, but so anyways, what does this have to do with magic? What does that have to do with our world? Well, you'll hear the term manifestation all the time, like people that, you know, are real spiritual new agers or whatever. They're really into that sort of thing, and or using that term. And really all that term is just a bringing something into reality, into the world in which we live here. I don't even like my cigar. But bringing something into reality, essentially, is the whole manifesting thing. So how do you think that happens, though? Right? That thing in magic is that they know that there's a flow that occurs, like a source from which things spring and come into existence, just as there is a reservoir in which they go to when they break down at the completion of their cycle and go back into the mix of things. It's the way stuff works, right? In that process of manifestation, it's a collection. It's a thing that comes on down the river, and it comes from a source. There are different sources for different things. There is a singular source for all those things, but there are separate, you know, places that certain things spring from with regard to direction, right? The source would be everything, so it could spring from anywhere. But when we're talking about individual aspects of something, that would come from a direction. Why do I say that? Well, because opposites are always at the opposite end of a thing, opposite end of a spectrum. Like magnets, like a north and a south. They're the very opposite ends of the tip of that thing. And there's a field that goes through that, but the strongest, most concentrated point at which north is north and south is south is at the end of that magnet. And so therefore that creates a direction. And so when things are manifested, when they come into existence directional. This is reflected in the arrow of time. And that's, we can see things that are born into life, that are created or made, and then eventually break down and disintegrate and return back into the system. So, why do I have Dante's Divine Comedy out? Well, there's an interesting bit that happens on Dante's journey through the Inferno portion of it that I'm going to read and disclose to you here, that throws some wisdom on this directionality sort of thing. It kind of gives you an idea of what I mean by it. And will hopefully provide us with a little understanding. I wonder if I got any more. Yeah, I got a little coffee in there. Let's take a sip. All right. So it comes from Canto 12. It's on page 21 here. And it's when Dante comes upon Chiron. And I don't know if you know who Chiron is, but he is it talks about it in the previous page here. But he's a centaur from Greek mythology. And that's pretty cool. We will make our answer to Chiron there as soon as we approach. Your headstrong will has always cost you dear. He nudged me then and said, that's Nessus there, who for the lovely Deianira died, and with his very blood avenged himself. He is the center, looking at his chest, is Chiron, tutor to the great Achilles. So he was Achilles' tutor. That other Pholus ever filled with rage. So, anyways, the significant portion of this is, just to summarize, he just mentions that that's Chiron over there. We're going to go take our question to Chiron. And he they start heading over there to Chiron. And as they're walking up to Chiron, Chiron's sitting there kicking it with his homies, who other inhabitants of hell or whatever. And he's like, "Yo, fellas, check this." As they're walking up, and he says something, and that's the summary of what happens here, to where he says, "Nearer to those fleet monsters we approached, and Chiron drew a shaft, and with its notch combed back his beard on either side his jaws. When he had thus uncovered his huge mouth, he said to his companions, 'Have you seen that he who goes beyond, or that he who goes behind moves what he touches? Not so the feet of shades are wont to do.' And my good leader, who was standing now beside his breast, where man and beast are joined, replied, 'He is indeed alive, and thus alone I show him through this dismal veil. Necessity doth bring him, not desire.'" So, the important portion there is the part there where he says, "Don't you see that he who walks behind," yo, guys, check it. The guy behind, the guy that's walking at the back there, you notice something different about him, man? He moves what he touches. And then his suspicion is confirmed when the reply is made that, yes, the guy that you're pointing at and talking about, he's alive, and I'm walking him through this dismal veil. Now, veil, the dismal veil that he's talking about there, that also is something of importance. When we're talking about direction, there's another bit in there where he mentions something. Maybe I should just find it for you. He mentions something about him being being saved from seeing something a certain way. Here, I'll read it to you. Standing, blah, blah, blah. It's down here, I think, at the bottom part. Go back on them. No. Moves what he touches. The task, he is no thief, nor rob the shade, but the power through which I take my way along so wild and difficult road. People with their heads, blah, blah, shadowed increase. Can't find it. Is it not in this bit here? There's a part where he talks about his ability to see. I think it's actually he's talking to a different guy that's not Chiron, maybe. But in the story, he ends up talking to this dude that doesn't know about certain news that's happening up on the surface, meaning like in the real world. And the reason that he can't is because the direction that he's able to see in time, he isn't able to see time move the way that the man is. He sees time in the opposite direction, so that he's blind to all of the present day occurrences that are happening, almost as though he is able to, like, he exists on the other side of perception from the human's ability to perceive time as it flows, with the future coming towards us and turning into past. You know what I'm saying? Don't get confused by it. But just try to think about that for a second. Meditate on that. Take what I've said in this episode and think about the directionality of something and the perspective, and how, if you were an otherworldly being, if you were something else, that you may perhaps view things differently. And you would view those things flowing in different ways. Perhaps you might view time moving in a different direction. You might view certain things, for instance, ghosts in our world. We can't see them. They are invisible, walk through things. I mean, this is just a thought experiment, hypothetically. Uh, Apparitions, spirits, whatever you'd like to call them. Things that exist in the realm that is not the solid physical realm but they are able to affect the physical realm. Perhaps a poltergeist of some sort, things that like push things around or whatever. Normally, with them, they phase through those things. Those are things that just they can go through, and we go through them. But perhaps think about it from their perspective in their world. Maybe in their world, from their perspective, they can't see us, and we just phase through them. But we can sometimes affect objects in their world. Perhaps inadvertently, maybe we can do it so through, I don't know, maybe people connect in it through dreams or something. These are just hypothetical thoughts I'm trying to get you guys to think through on perceiving some other world that's not ours but parallel to it. Do I mean like a parallel dimension, yada yada? No, when I talk about dimensions, I talk about dimensions in a specific manner, in like a very solid, like scientific geometric manner when I'm talking about dimensions. When I talk about worlds, that's a different story. That could be things that exist through consciousness, maybe, or heck, we can make up worlds in our head. Heck, Harry Potter is a world, you know. Dungeons and Dragons, like things, all us human beings make worlds and do those things. But there's even a directionality to that. Like we project down onto that two dimensionality from our thoughts onto the paper, out into the world that we have around us, you know what I mean? And there's a direction to that, you know. And then we also perceive and receive information into our brains. There's a direction to that. And that's an in and out sort of direction. So, when it was talking about the veil in there, there's two different types of directions. There's a direction that's a direction that has to do with the out to in, and a direction that has to do from the inside moving towards outside. Two different flows. And if we're sandwiched in between the inside and the outside, then we can receive flows from inside to out where we're at, or we can receive flows from outside of ourselves to into us. Like that's kind of where some of the idea of these manifestations come from. But one flows things out into the physical world from in like a solid sort of a sense, whereas one manifests it or brings it in more of like a mental, subconscious, or even spiritual sort of a way, more of a subtle sort of influence. But that's where that whole passage there where it talked about the veil, this dismal veil, that's like the barrier or the zone between ours and theirs. It's like the spot where it's thinnest, where they could most affect our world. It's like the mist they would have to cross through to get into our reality, or that we would have to cross to get into theirs. That mist could seem to be 1,000 miles long, or it could be something that takes a half a second to get through, and boom, all of a sudden you're looking through it like it's a mirror, or like you're peering through a stargate or something. These are just musings. Leave your comments below what you think. I'd love to have conversations with those that are into it. Like I said, I'm not an expert in this stuff, and there are plenty of people that cover this topic and stuff, but I'm not one that likes to subscribe to a belief without being able to know and understand. And so I've done a lot of research on it, and I just wanted to do a video to try to share some of that knowledge with you. Tell me what you think about it, and let me know if you liked it. Alright, I'll talk to y'all soon again. Thanks.